So we're really here to talk about strategy, that wonderful HR topic of strategy. And I suppose the first question from me, Matt, is HR strategy or people strategy? Have you got a preference? Does it matter?
Yeah, I think for me, I do definitely have a preference. And I think for me, it would be people strategy. I think, I know this divides opinion, but I do think that actually calling your people strategy a people strategy makes it all about them. And importantly, I think in most organizations, the enabler to delivering whatever service or product that you're looking to deliver to your customer is all about how well your people are equipped and enabled to do so. And for me, I think the HR strategy suggests that it is more around process and protocol, whereas people is more about the broader holistic needs of an employee and an organization in terms of what it requires its people to do.
That's really interesting. So I think what you're saying there is the strategy is really just a means of joining up what the organisation wants and what its people need to be successful in that organisation. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think any successful people strategy needs to be born out from what the organisation strategy is. So taking your organisational vision and mission, and particularly the goals that you're looking to achieve within sort of a 3 to 5 year period, using that to understand, well, what elements of that then is it that we need our people to be focused on and equipped with in order for them to deliver against those goals and therefore our mission. So yeah, absolutely, I would see it coming from there.
Yeah. So what would you typically see in a people strategy? You know, if you were managing a business, you were in an HR department, you didn't have a strategy in place, where would you start, Matt?
Yeah, and that is a very interesting question. And I think where you start is probably less important as to where you end up. So I would say that some of that will be driven by the priorities of the organisation and dependent upon what's happening in that organisation. Okay. For example, your strategy might need to start to focus on areas around process and practice if they're not well established already in that organisation. And you might need to look at some of the basics in terms of creating the right policies and processes to make sure that you are compliant with relevant legislation or even changing legislation. But if you were to assume that those elements were already in place, then you might want to start by looking at, well, where are your people now against where it is that ideally, if you had a magic wand, you'd like them to be tomorrow. And from that, you will generally draw out 3 or 4 fairly big topics that you might want to focus on. For example, you might notice that you have a need for some leadership development because collectively the feedback from people is saying that actually we're not quite getting what we need, or our leaders aren't equipped well enough for the journey ahead that we're going to ask them to take everybody else on. So you'd start with that so that your leaders effectively have got a toolkit for them to be able to move forward and then take those people with them. Or it may be around well-being. So a very hot topic at the moment, given the state of well-being of a number of people, in fact, probably most people across the world, hopefully coming out of a worldwide pandemic, we'll see that people's well-being will have been impacted in many different ways. And therefore, they're looking for their employers to ensure that they're supporting them so that they can continue to come to work and reduce any absenteeism that may be connected to that. So very much, Adam, what I'm saying is it will very much depend on each organisation and what their demands are in any given moment in time, alongside where it is they want to get to within that sort of 3 to 5 year period.
Sure. And it sounds, Matt, like these interventions, these activities, these key building blocks in the strategy will all have a really significant impact on the organisation's culture as well.
Absolutely, and certainly where I have decided to start the creation of the people strategy at Acorns was all about effectively establishing and refining the culture it is that we want to have across the organisation. And generally what you find if you start at that point is that everything else kind of flows out from that. So if you want a collaborative culture where people are engaged and motivated and empowered to be able to achieve what we're asking of them, then there are a number of things that you need to look at. Firstly, do your values enable that? Do you have the right behaviours established across the organisation? Are your leaders and managers operating within the framework of that culture that you're trying to create? Do they know it? Do they understand it? So it's about
really
establishing that
interesting.
platform.
Yeah, really interesting that you touched on behaviours there, Matt. Can you just expand on that a little bit more and tell us really what you mean and why is it that employees' behaviours have such an impact on culture?
Absolutely. I think if we take it back to thinking about what a culture is, so a culture is effectively almost like a sort of a group where you think about, well, that has a shared purpose and shared values in terms of everybody signing up to that to create this culture that you work within. And because it is sort of, I suppose, a shared group, you absolutely need to make sure that everybody in that group is aligned and committed to where you're going. And a key part of that is about ensuring that the behaviours that we've established as an organisation do create that culture that will move everybody forward. As without it, what you have the risk of is silos developing, people operating at slightly different levels in slightly different ways, and losing that collective focus of achieving the overall goals that an organisation is setting out to achieve.
Okay, so what would be the real kind of business benefit of getting this right? How during your career, how have you seen it work really well?
I think, first of all, that in most organisations, you're most likely to have your highest expense is likely to be your people. They're going to cost you quite a lot as an organisation, and effectively they are a very expensive but very necessary and important resource. If we go back to what I said in the beginning about most organizations will be very reliant on the success of their people in their ability to sell, liaise, work with, deliver services to the customer. Ultimately, this is where that journey starts. So the value to the organization is making sure that you have your people who are best equipped, that your most expensive resource, to actually do everything that you're asking of them at the very highest level of productivity. So, for example, some of the things that you might expect to see in an organisation that has a strong culture with well-defined behaviours and everybody sort of aiming in the right direction is low absenteeism, low labour turnover, a high and strong reputation in the marketplace, which makes it easy to attract when you are recruiting to roles. You would expect to see a highly motivated workforce that would typically be anywhere between 5 to 8% more productive than a workforce that isn't as engaged and motivated. And you would expect the team to have a greater sense of well-being because they feel appreciated and respected, and therefore are much more likely to go the extra mile and therefore deliver a better service to the people who are on the receiving end of that.
So there really are some quite tangible commercial benefits to any organisation in investing in the strategy, in investing in the development of the right culture.
Absolutely, and I think we've just sort of touched the tip of the iceberg there. Because actually underneath all of those elements, there are things like you're creating the right environment for people to learn and grow so that they're not only equipped with the tools and skills that they need to do the job today, but also having a focus on, well, what will we need in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months time?
Sure.
And most businesses and organizations these days are having to become quite agile around how they change and adapt to various environments. And one of the key things that we need to make sure in an effective people strategy is that we have enabled our teams to have that agile mindset to be able to move rapidly with us. And that can only happen where you have a strategy where the culture is embedded in the right way. And we're focused on where tomorrow's leaders are coming from. As unfortunately in healthcare, where Acorns is very much rooted, we have a unique situation where we have an aging workforce, which therefore means that lots of people are coming up to retirement age. And where are the new people going to come from? And in our case, we're actually finding, as are the NHS, finding it's very difficult to find and recruit nurses, in particular because there is a national shortage. So, for example, in our people strategy, we are going to be focusing very much next year on bringing people in at a level where an entry level into the organisation, into a healthcare role, and providing them with the training and learning over a period of a couple of years so that they can actually become qualified whilst working and grow and progress within the organisation, and effectively growing our own talent for the future. If we didn't have a strategy that was focused on that, we would very quickly find that actually we wouldn't have a viable option of operating our hospices, and therefore we lose the purpose of what we're actually there to do.